Millennials are your largest consumer market. In fact, in 2017, it was the first year in American history where the youngest generation has become the largest part of the market. So how you capture the millennial market will literally determine not only your customers of tomorrow, but your customers of today. Hey everyone, I'm Gabrielle Bosché. I'm known as America's Millennial Expert. I have been studying my generation since the age of 17. I have over 11 years of research experience, 4 books, and I run the firm The Millennial Solution, which is an international training and consulting firm focusing on developing practical strategies to apply how to market to, manage, relate, and engage the next generation. This conversation about marketing is actually extremely well timed as we are just coming off of developing a nationwide study on millennials and brand loyalty. Now, we're still collecting some of the data, but I'm going to share with you today some of the early conclusions that we've made so that you can begin to not only market yourself to a generation, but you can find incredibly loyal, incredibly excited new customers who are going to take on your brand and who are going to share it like wildfire with their friends, their families, and their influencers. We've had the opportunity to work with most of America's top brands, helping them understand what motivates millennials. And so today I'm going to share with you the practical side of how you engage with millennials. Plenty of other people will come in and try and explain to you, that you just need a Facebook page to reach millennials, or you're just not relevant enough because your branding isn't quite there. Today we're going to be sharing with you the exact strategies that we've used with brands like these to help them capture the millennial market. So I like to tell people, although we are a research firm, we hate theory. We're all about the practical application. So you're going to be getting a whole lot of checklists. You're going to be getting a whole lot of data. You're going to get a whole lot of case studies of how brands have literally reinvented themselves in order to capture the millennial market. And I don't want any of you out there thinking, well, I'm not a cool, sexy brand. I don't really have, a really cool product that millennials are going to be interested in. Well, wait till the end because I'm literally going to show you how one very simple product who no one thought anyone under the age of 35 would be interested in is a top seller amongst millennials, all because they understood these strategies. So stick with me to the end. There's also going to be time for questions because I know as you're going to be watching this, you're going to have, questions about your particular brand, maybe some specific strategies that you and your team have put in place. And we'll have time for you to be able to come up to me afterwards and answer your specific questions. The millennial market is extremely different than other markets. One of the biggest mistakes that brands make is that they assume that millennials are literally just a younger version of themselves. They're thinking, well, what would I want when I was 19 or 20? Well, first of all, let's put a couple things on the table. What do we mean by millennial? A millennial, according to our research and the work that we use based off of U.S. Census Bureau data. Now, tons of people are out there saying millennials are, 19 to 23 or, whatever. The data we use shows that millennials are 1982 to 2000. So we're talking about 83 million millennials in the United States. That is a massive part of the market share. Like I said, largest part of the consumer market. But the mistake that people make all the time is assuming, well, yeah, they're just younger versions of us, which simply isn't the case. So today, as we're going through this presentation, you're going to learn how millennials truly are unique. And then you'll also be able to see some key motivators across your current customer base as well. Because again, I hate it. And I see consultants coming in and charging my clients so much money saying, oh, well, you just need to completely change everything you do and create a whole new line of product. Absolutely not. What I get so excited about doing is translating the mission, the service, what it is that you do for your customers into something my generation gets excited about. So I'm not going to tell you to reinvent yourself. I'm going to tell you to translate yourself in a way that my generation gets. Because really at the end of the day, it's not a product problem. It's a translation and understanding problem. Millennials have overtaken the market. If you're thinking, okay, Gabrielle, I get it. Millennials, everyone's changing for them. Workplaces are changing. The best workplaces and the best companies are literally multi-generational from the inside out. Your customer base is going to be multi-generational. So the inside of your office, the inside of your team needs to be multi-generational as well. However, this next generation, like I said, it's taking over. And here's something really interesting that we've seen tried and true in the last century is if a company, and this is really important here, if a company wants to reach all generations, they reach the youngest generation, or typically that, 18 to 30-year-old demographic. But if they only want to reach a particular demographic, say, those who are, 56 to 75, that's the only demographic that they're going to reach. So what does that mean for you? It means if you listen to what I'm going to be sharing with you today and you tweak to attract the millennial generation, you'll get everybody else. But if you only take approaches that attract a subset of your population, of your consumer base, you're going to be missing out on everyone else. That, my friends, is why this conversation is so important. It's not because millennials are so special. It has everything to do with making sure that you have massive brand dominance, that your customers, whether they're 18 or 85, know who you are, know what value you bring, and are excited enough about what you've done that they're sharing it with their friends and their family. And we're going to get into what those types of mediums are based off of each generation here in a moment. Now, it doesn't surprise anyone that millennials use their mobile devices for, nearly absolutely everything. Our phones have really become an extension of ourselves. Millennials are really the first generation where not only is technology what we use to see the world, but it's how the world sees us as well. So what does that mean? That means that this generation wants to use their mobile device, whether that's their iPhone, their Samsung, their smartphone, even their tablet, in order to interact with each other, interact with a brand, interact with a movement so that they are seen. So no longer, my friends, is marketing one way. Marketing is 360. Now you literally have a constant feedback session with your marketplace because they want to give you feedback constantly, whether that's in the form of a review, a Google review, Yelp review, etc. This generation is wanting to share with you who they are, what they like, how they can help you change your brand if you will only listen. I'm going to share with you here in a few moments some of the major myths that brands we work with all the time make when they think that they're going to become more millennial friendly. They think, I just need to have a Facebook page. That's going to get them. I just need to, if I have an app, then I'm really going to capture millennials. And that's in fact not what any of our research shows. Our research shows that many brands have exploded despite technology, not because of it, because they have figured out one of the other 4 C's, which I'm going to be sharing with you here in a moment, of how you actually effectively capture the millennial space. However, I do want to hover here for a moment and say that if your site isn't mobile friendly, if you do not have something that's accessible quickly on a mobile device, if it isn't clear and concise, and you can't, within 15 seconds, here's a rule, within 15 seconds, understand who you are, what you do, and why you're different, then people are going to move on. Making sure that your website is mobile adaptive is incredibly important. This generation is going to be looking for an interaction component with you. I'm going to briefly discuss here some of the kind of best practices that we've started to see some of our clients use. For example, loyalty programs and subscriptions. Now, I don't have time to go through kind of the sample programs that we've actually found work really well when it comes to millennial engagement. Cost matters. Millennials on average have a $38,000 student debt ticket. That means that when they're looking at buying something, that's constantly ticking in the back of their head. We've seen that as we've worked with those associations and groups like realtors, for example, who are looking at helping this next generation purchase their first home. We work with a number of major car brands and in the auto industry. And that's one of the first things that we tackle is how does this fit into my larger financial picture? And so keeping in mind that nearly a third of millennials actually rely on their parents for some sort of financial support. Now, keep in mind, millennials are ages 18 to 37 right now. And so that means that you've got a generation that is being fed money by their parents at a much longer rate than other generations have in the past. So the implications of that are really quite interesting. This generation, like most other young generations, prefer urban living. But here's what's interesting is that there are a number of studies showing that millennials are the first generation to settle down, as in get married, have kids, which they're taking, PS, 7 years longer to do that. They're moving closer to where they grew up or to where their parents are, which is really fascinating. So no longer are we seeing that that departure from your parents and moving across the country or moving to, somewhere more exotic or more fun. We're actually seeing them doing that for a year or 3 years and then moving back home to where they came from, which is really interesting and frankly very encouraging for those of you who are in more rural settings where you're thinking, oh gosh, millennials are never going to want to come back. We're actually seeing the opposite is true. I want to hone in here on our data on millennials and their income because it's really important to keep in mind what income factor that you're going after and keeping in mind that this generation tends to be at a lower income level than the rest of the population. And that's, again, extremely typical of any generation. The younger generations tend to make less money because they're just starting their careers. With that, on top of the fact that they have so much student loan debt, that's kind of the double whammy that many more expensive and more luxurious brands are having to deal with a new generation. So keeping in mind your price point is going to have to hit one of their other inspiration points and motivators in order for you to capture them. If the cost component, if you can't meet the bare minimum cost, I'm going to actually show you how you can still capture that millennial market with a higher price point. Our research actually shows that there are 4 different types of millennials. We typically put millennials into 2 different groups, and it's going to be really helpful for you as marketers in the room for you to be able to understand that millennials are not just this giant, vast, scary word out there. Millennials are, in fact, a generation that has so much diversity that we literally can't study them all at once, and so we actually divide them into 4 groups. So millennial group A is the older generation, which is me. They're born between 1982 and 1990. So I was born in 1988. I almost forgot when I was born. And they're a part of the generation that, is going to still remember what it was like to, have a dial-up sound. I'm totally dating myself here. A dial-up sound, when you're trying to sign on to the internet, whereas someone who's younger had no idea, right, where Wi-Fi was, a natural right to most of them. And that younger group, born between 1991 and 2000, we're actually seeing they're so distinctive that they're really a subset of the generation. And so we really divide them into 2. So I'm going to go over the 4 different types of millennials and how you market to them here, because I think it's extremely important for your marketing team. So if your social media teams are in the room, if your heads of marketing are here, make sure that they're taking notes so that they can literally craft sub-market campaigns to each of these 4 groups, because it's going to be extremely helpful for you to be able to capture the millennial market by having specificity and not fall under, my friends, the biggest mistake I see marketers make every day is that they just pretend like all millennials are the same. Like, oh yeah, of course they want an app. We'll create an app. Well, what subset of the market actually wants an app? Because statistically, 99% of the app store is not actually downloaded. Side note on texting versus email, for those of you who think email campaigns still work, about 13% of all emails are read. That's both personal and professional. And about 98% of all text messages are read. So if someone ever says, sorry, I didn't see your text, 98% chance is that they are lying. They just didn't respond to you. Some of you are like, oh, that makes so much sense now about that one not so relationship that I had. So let's get into the 4 different types of millennials. The first is the unattached. It's part of millennial group B, younger group. Typical millennial, wanderlust, not wanting to commit, very techie, wanting to make sure that they keep their options open. They have this FOMO, right? Fear of missing out. They don't even commit to brands because they're so wanting to be on the cutting edge of things that they don't necessarily commit to anything. And so this is frankly a floating target when it comes to marketing, because this is a generation who is part of the generation who's more likely to go to YouTube to find an answer than to call their parents or even to find an expert somewhere. So the unattached are going to be self-learners, where they're going to try to be more of an expert by finding things on the internet. So if you do want to go after the unattached, you're going to have incredibly compelling content that is going to make them feel like, wow, I got the best information possible, which is going to be extremely different than the next group, which is the explorers. So the explorers are those also to younger part of the generation who are, maybe they're taking classes or they're looking to essentially better themselves in some way. They're demonstrating a personal commitment to becoming a better version of themselves. So they're maybe getting certified in something. They're showing a very clear track. And so on the consumer side, if you are doing B2C and you're wanting to, maybe you're in the health and wellness space, for example, the explorers are perfect for you because they're into self-development. They're into making themselves better in kind of every sense of the word. So you're going to want to market to an explorer differently than you're going to want to market to someone who's more of the unattached, who's saying, yeah, maybe I'm going to try this. The unattached, you want to get them into a subscription model where, they're paying $20 a month or $5 a month, because that's going to give you some constant income. Whether or not they actually use that service, it's going to keep them accountable because they're not necessarily going to they're not really going to commit long term. Explorers, you can get them in at a base price of maybe $20 for a back massage or something. That would be an incredibly cheap back massage, and get them into more of a funnel that's going to keep them longer term. So important things to keep in mind. The third group are what we call the distracteds. And some people give me a hard time for why they're called that. I didn't name them, okay? So the distracteds are the older part of the generation, my part of the generation, that they are born between, again, 1982 and 1990. They have young families. They have a focus on kind of keeping things as convenient as possible, and so things like a meal service that gets delivered pre-made is absolutely essential for them. Something that's more intuitive, that's going to actually help them cut down time and cost, is going to be really important. So you're thinking young families here, and for any of you who are looking at really capturing a sub-market, I'm going to give you an absolute freebie and tell you that you need to go after millennial moms. Oh yeah, millennial moms. So we were doing I was doing a project researching millennial moms and Walmart, and really determining how to best capture a generation who may or may not be using something like Walmart, but realizing that is such an incredible opportunity for them. Once you figure out what motivates this next generation, they were wanting the quickness, is that a word? They wanted the convenience, but frankly, more than anything else, they wanted someone to say, it's okay, I've actually thought through, you may also like these products as well. So there was a concierge, like you'll see me mentioning that quite a bit. By concierge, I mean as if there was a virtual person, real or not, saying, hey, Gabrielle, you may also like these things. I thought about it, and based off of your past purchases or what you've already looked at, these would also to be of interest to you. We're already starting to see some sites that actually include that already. Express does that if you go online and they say, you may also like these outfits. Amazon certainly does that quite brilliantly with their algorithms that say, customers also viewed. But we're really seeing that become a best practice across brands, that we're wanting some intuitiveness of you thinking about things that we maybe didn't think of. So the distracteds, when you're wanting to get to them, it's convenience above everything else. Cost is certainly important as well. But this is also a part of the generation is going to get their identity from how they help other people as well. So although they're distracteds, they're still wanting to be seen as an authority in something. The final group are who we call the activists. Now, this is a really fascinating and fun part of the generation because they're a little bit older, and so they've seen some things. They're more mature, but they're also looking to really champion something. And so we see this with a part of the generation who's really interested in, for example, making sure that there's transparency in how products are made, that supply chain is publicly available, that they know where things were developed, and kind of making sure that they're making good choices with what it is that they're purchasing. Now, this is going to be different than the distracteds, who that may be important, but it may not be as important as cost, convenience, or one of the other C's I'm going to go over here in a moment. So the activists really want to make sure that everything that they buy represents a move forward in the justice space. Now, every generation has something that kind of makes them unique, and this is something I found in studying generations for over a decade, but what consistently it shows that millennials really differentiates this generation is the fact that we are so passionate about justice, and we want to make sure that everything we do makes a difference, including where we buy our coffee, or where we buy our shoes, or what college we go to, or anything. So we want to make sure that there's a representation of everything we consume, that it is kind of representative of our overall values. Now, you're all going to ask me about Generation Z, so I'm just going to tell you up front before you start to question, like, well, what about Gen Z? Is it going to be different? The short answer is yes, of course. Generation Z, born after 2001, is going to be highly tech addicted. If you think millennials have a technology affinity, let's put it that way, just get ready, because the next generation, Generation Z, is incredibly going to be tech dependent. But there's some really key distinctions that we're seeing with this next generation. Now, giant caveat here is that Generation Z is under the age of 18, and so we don't have a lot of statistical data because in most cases it's actually illegal for you to poll them. So beware of those people out there who are like, 96% of Generation Z think this. In many cases that may not be true, or they may not have actually been gathering the data correctly. So, but I think it's important to know, and these are more generational trends that we're seeing in anecdotal, but I think it's important. So Generation Z, their expectation is going to be much more independence, which is similar to Generation X. So if I have any Xers in the room, don't worry, you guys have reinforcements. I always joke around that Generation X is kind of like a generation of cats, where it's like, I'll come hang out with you when I want, but for the most part, don't touch me. And millennials are just like, I don't know what millennials are, a bunch of geese or something. But Generation Z is going to be much more of that independent streak like Generation X, where let me make a decision on my own. I'm going to research it on my own. I'm going to make a decision on my own, and I'll come to you with my decision. So that means that the content marketing side of things is going to be even more important. And that content really has to be extremely dynamic. It has to be entertaining. It has to be exciting. And so that's going to be really important. The expectation really comes down to that they're going to be empowered to make the decision on their own, versus millennials, who are more likely to make a decision based off of the influence of someone else. So whether that's a family, a friend, or even a review from someone even anonymous on the web, but that's going to be more likely to inform a millennial decision. Technology is going to be much more important. So having more bells and whistles is going to be more important to Generation Z than millennials. Millennials are much more functional when it comes to tech. Is it clean? Is it modern? Is it usable? Is it user friendly? Right? That's why millennials love Apple. Is it's very intuitive and it's very clean and easy to understand. So we love our tech, but we want to make sure that it's usable. The communication piece really has to do with what type of messaging are you going to be going after. So millennials are much more of a justice-oriented generation. Again, so that means you can really message, buy this and you're going to make a difference. You'll plant a tree. You'll help salvage water in sub-Saharan Africa. You'll do something here when you start to invest. next generation is going to be much more motivated by you asking them to do something. So they're going to be much more personally empowered, whereas the millennial generation has almost a passive philanthropy where they're wanting to invest in companies who are doing well. The next generation, Generation Z, is going to want to actually do it with you or do it for you. And so that's going to be extremely interesting as brands start to figure that out of how do you get people together, get them excited about a brand, and then empower them to actually execute on it. The cost component for a younger generation who, frankly, is going to be more financially stable going into their 20s than millennials even were. Remember, millennials came of age during the economic recession, which has really changed the priorities of what we spend our money on. So, for example, and we found this working with hotels and hospitality for years, is that millennials will spend money on experiences but not on things. We're not necessarily likely to buy a house in a neighborhood, but we are very likely to spend that money on going on an international vacation like Thailand or Bali once a year with our friends or our significant other. So the cost component is going to be slightly easier to sell to a generation that's more likely to have more savings coming out of their 20s than their millennial colleagues were. And finally, trust. Generation Z is going to be a highly distrustful generation. I don't even know if distrustful is a word. We just made it up, folks. So they are not going to trust you, just like millennials aren't going to trust you. It used to be in brand marketing, 6 out of 7 dentists recommend this toothpaste, and that's why you should buy it. And that just simply is not the case anymore. Now we are seeing a generation question everything, and it's not out of disrespect, but it really is because we've been marketed to from such an early age that we want to trust you, but it's almost like we need you to prove it first. So the trust component is going to be even more of a challenge as you're starting to enter into marketing to the next generation. Now, extremely important to look at brands that are doing well and not to necessarily compare, but to grab best practices. And so I want to share here some really effective brands that have become extremely, have either been founded as millennial friendly or have become extremely friendly. And we do this by teaching the 4 C's. So there's community, convenience, character, and then cost. So community, when a millennial buys something, we enter into a community. We want to be a part of something. There's an identity factor. I buy this certain kind of car and what it says about me, right? And so we see that with things like Airbnb, which is completely based off of community. Either you're staying with someone while they're there, you're just staying in someone's home. There's a connection piece that this next generation wants to feel like they're constantly connected. This global network. So in a world that's very social network dependent, I find it very interesting that this generation still wants to have that personal connection. So that means everything from being connected, being able to quickly share their product experience online is really important. So the community could be real, as in, going to their corner coffee shop, and that's kind of the community that they're a part of. It could be their local farmers market, which we see is really important for millennials for multiple reasons. But you also too see, that this generation wants to share their experiences constantly. So you may criticize my generation for taking a picture of our breakfast and, say, that's so ridiculous. They look so silly. No one cares about what you had for breakfast. And, we just look at the likes at the end of the day. We're like, I don't know, like 600 people apparently liked it, right? So our community looks different. We want to be constantly connected. That's really what technology does for us. The second C is convenience. Now, everyone wants something quick and easy, right? That's why there's such thing as fast food. I mean, we want things quickly, but millennials, the expectation is that everything will be convenient. So everything from Blue Apron, which is a great example of a brand or a type of brand. Remember, I talked about subscriptions where you sign up once, I enter my information once, and then you continue to bill me every single month and you send things straight to my door. The same thing with Amazon Prime. Retail is completely flipping on its head and trying to figure out how do they differentiate, because what can a retail store do that an Amazon.com or something else like it can't do? And a lot of it has to do with community, and they're trying to figure it out. And so we work with a lot of brands, helping them create an experience that's going to be more tangible, more exciting, more motivating than the convenience that they're going to get from a one click. M Tailor is an example of a tailoring company where you actually take your own measurements and then send it in, and they'll send you back a suit. So this generation is using technology to do many of the things that humans did. Don't worry, robots aren't coming to take your job, but how they're using technology is really quite fascinating. The third C is character. And this is probably one of the most important, is because this generation, like I said, wants to invest in companies and in products that do well. It's what I called before passive philanthropy, or pass-through philanthropy, where we'll pay 30 cents more for your cup of coffee if we know that it's fair trade. We don't mind spending more. So the next C, cost is important, but not as important as character, because character actually can trump all of these things. Even if it's inconvenient, a millennial will buy something if it has a good cause, if it's something that's reflective of a priority that they do, because then it hits everything else. If you sell something to a millennial, they get excited about it, they're going to share it with their community. So the final C is cost. And there are plenty of brands out there that do this, extremely well. Like Chipotle is a great example that's actually hits all the other C's as well. And here in a moment, I'm going to show you how you can hit all four C's quickly. But it's quick, it's convenient. There's a community there. When you go to Chipotle, there's kind of like the same type of looking person that you go there. But it's also extremely affordable, and you get a lot of food for what it is. So the cost component is important. Hulu is another great example that millennials are ditching cable. So this generation doesn't need 380 channels, right? That's what it used to be, is, oh my gosh, I have the options. But option is not as important to millennials as access. Access means I can use it if I want, but options means it's there for me. And there's a really important difference there that I think is important, because an Airbnb, for example, is more about access. I have access to a vacation home if I wanted it, but I don't have to. So it's not this obligation. It's just I can if I want to, and I can pay for it. And so we're finding more and more millennials care about access than ownership. And that's a key distinction that brands that have been built on ownership and this American dream that you have the car and the house and the boat and the pool are having to change quickly, because the next generation simply doesn't prioritize things the same way that their parents did. So here's a really interesting example of how a brand, Warby Parker, has been able to actually make themselves kind of all four all at the same time. So Warby Parker, if you're not familiar, is a glasses company. They kind of cut out the middleman and create really quality frames that are stylish and extremely convenient. So when they started online, and here's what's interesting, and we're seeing a lot of brands do this. They started online, but then now they have these pop-up stores, and they have actual brick and mortars where they realize that people, although it's nice to be able to purchase things online, some people just want to go in the store, and you can't actually walk away with glasses in the store. You still have to order it online. So the process is that you go online, you find a couple pairs that you like, then you enter in your billing information, and they send them to you. I think you pay like shipping or something, and then you can try on 3 or 4 different pairs, pick the pair that you want, send them all back, and then order them. And you take a picture of your eyes, and so they do your eye measurements via an app, and you send those in, and you send in your prescription, and then 2 weeks later you have your glasses. But they've also too been able to hit some of the other C's. So community is great because when you do want to go to a store, it's always packed. People are trying on glasses. It's really fun. They've got great music. But there's also too incredible customer service where they're touching base with you via text message or email, whatever you say that you prefer, making sure that you're having a good experience. So that's extremely important. There's the convenience factor. Needless to say, it's much nicer being able to try on glasses in your own home, try on different clothes, like which works, which doesn't, than having to actually go into a store. Character, for every pair of glasses that you buy, they donate a pair to someone in need. So there's this buy one, give one component, which is extremely popular. And then cost, it's significantly less expensive to get a quality pair of very modern frames for Warby Parker. So most people have, 2, 3, maybe 4 different frames from this brand rather than just having one maybe more expensive frame from one of the more name brands. The millennial customer experience is extremely important. So now I'm going to go into the deep kind of nitty gritty of millennial marketing. So if you guys are taking notes, which I hope that you are, I really want you guys to pay attention because this is really where the rubber hits the road. So we gave some examples. We are going to go through a couple of different case studies, and then we're going to actually show you kind of how you actually apply this. So when it comes to millennial customer experience, you have to realize what are their expectations. Now, expectations is kind of the magic word in our firm because we found expectations, when you violate the expectations of your customer, it's extremely difficult to get them back. So whether their expectation is that, you're going to be there at 5, say you're the cable guy, right? And you're not there till 10, it violates that expectation. If your expectation is that something, is going to be, delivered quickly to your home, but it takes 2 weeks, you violated that expectation. So giving the customer expectations and then fulfilling on them is extremely important, and then exceeding those expectations. So setting expectations of your customers is really important, particularly with millennials who seem to be more unforgiving when it comes to if their expectations are being violated. The next is to actually invite millennials into your customer experience. So that means that this generation really does want to provide feedback to you. We want to have you understand how to better engage with us, and we'll share with you. And unlike back in the 90s, going old school here, guys. Back in the 90s, it used to be build it and they will come, right? It used to be build the store and then we'll market it and people will show up. That's not how things go anymore. It really is build it with them and then they will share the word like crazy. But this idea that, build it first and then market second doesn't work with millennials. It's an organic marketing that's happening throughout the process rather than happening at the end. Give this next generation an opportunity to own the information, to be able to share what it is that you're doing and really grow your brand amongst their generation. Give them something tangible that they can actually own. And then finally, give early and then exclusive customer access. So as I've been sharing, if you have a brand loyalty program, do something special. It's more than just a discount. You're going to have to really think above and beyond about what that customer experience is going to be and why it's going to be different. What about being a part of your loyalty program is better than your competitors, for example? So keep that in mind. Millennials really want, and I'm going to break down based off of kind of the main aspects of marketing your product. So first, price. Like I said before, money matters to everyone, but especially a generation that may be struggling financially thanks to going to college. So if you're going to have price, we want something that's clear, firm, and easy to understand, no haggling. We see this with auto sales, for example, where CarMax is one of the most popular ways for millennials to buy cars. Now we even have other brands that literally They will deliver a car to your house because no longer do salespeople represent information information distributors, they're actually really just kind of closers at the end of the day, where, you may go onto a dealership before and say, hey, what do you think of this car? What's the mileage? And you're asking the salesperson almost as a consultant. But that's not the case anymore. People really do all of their own research. They've watched the YouTube videos of how it drives in different terrains. They've read the reviews. They've asked their friends. They've really started to collect their own set of information. And really, by the time that they're walking onto a dealership, their mind has been set, and then they're just asking, do you have it in blue? So the role of the salesperson is certainly changing. The next aspect is access. Now, that's whether it's access to your product itself or access to information about your product. So making sure that it's quick and easy and understandable. So do you have a new product? Then you need a quick video, a 30-second video about what that product does, and then a longer, maybe 5-minute video that goes more in depth, that maybe has an interview, and having that on things like Vimeo and YouTube and Instagram and some of the other sites is going to be extremely important. But having access is great. And so if you can't have an experience that's maybe local, maybe being able to broadcast that experience to those who may not be there. The customer service component is important, but it's interesting. Whereas other generations, say your internet goes out, they want to call someone on the phone and have them walk them through it. That is not the case when it comes to millennials. I think millennials would rather do anything else rather than talk to a customer service representative on the phone. So having AI, messenger bots, those are all options that millennials certainly prefer and enjoy. They would rather have something that is AI and quick that can answer their questions versus having someone literally be on the other side of it. So we're going to certainly see more of that as technology becomes more accessible to even smaller companies who may be able to start using some of those bots. The next is technology. There's certainly an expectation that your technology is going to work and that it's going to be dynamic. So whether that it's your website or maybe you have a tech product, or maybe it's tech delivered, but making sure that technology is clean, but also to engaging is extremely important. The next is design. So how your product looks is incredible, especially for a generation who is so visually oriented. I mean, think about it. We founded Facebook, but then all of our parents joined Facebook, and now the largest generation that's on Facebook are baby boomers. Sorry, mom and dad. And now we've exited to things like Snapchat and in particular Instagram. So Instagram really is just a picture book. And so if you don't have a product that we can share in a beautiful picture, then you're not going to get that virality that great brands and products really do. So think about what your design looks like and whether or not it's shareable. The referrals is something really important that any business wants, whether you're small or large, is you want people talking about it. But that really comes down to your story. And it has to be kind of built into what the product is itself. And so if I buy something, say I buy, a coffee mug, let's just keep this simple. I want to know, is there a fun saying? Can I take a picture of it? Can I share it with my friends? Will I want to buy one for one of my girlfriends? There's got to be some sort of stickiness that someone's going to want to share. And so it's got to be a balance of ownership that they feel like, wow, I really want to, I know someone who would like this, or this reminds me of someone, or it's personal, but also to empowering them in order to create brand messengers and brand ambassadors from your current customers. And finally, marketing. One of the biggest mistakes that I see brands make all the time is they just tell people about the product and don't focus on one of the other elements, which I'll talk about in a moment. But the first is entertainment. If you don't entertain people, you've lost them. And that's not just funny and that's not just drama, but it's something that captures the imagination of your customers. If you're not capturing their imagination, then you're losing the ability to be a part of their future, because that is the theater of the mind that your customers coming to you saying, help me discover or imagine a future where something looks different than it is today, whether you're selling flowers or you're selling a car, or you're selling homes, there's this aspect of imagination that great marketers will tap into when it comes to reaching their millennial market. So when it comes to the actual content, what you're going to be putting forward, so whether that's an ad, whether that is copy, whether that's a billboard, or even a push notification from an app, there's really 3 keys that I want you guys to keep in mind. The first is that it needs to be entertaining. I have talked about this before. If you're not entertaining people, if you're not getting them excited about purchasing your product, then you're going to lose them, particularly a generation who's used to being entertained constantly. I mean, I went to the dentist the other day and there was a TV on from the ceiling so that I could watch TV while I was having my teeth cleaned. I mean, this generation is so used to having information be extremely entertaining before even it is educational. So if you want to capture people, you're going to have to entertain them. Why is it that during the Super Bowl, all we talk about is what the best commercial was? It's because people want to be entertained. They want a storyline. So make sure that you're doing something entertaining. A big mistake people make is like, oh, well, they just, I just need to tell them more about the product. If you're not capturing our attention, if you're not getting us excited, and if you're not really letting us have a good time while you're telling us about your product, we are out. The second thing is informational. Now, you need to teach someone something new when you're marketing to them. That's part of the marketing process, but how you do it is really important. So we were doing a study with banks a few years ago. How do you get millennials into your local bank? And here's what we found. We did about a year-long study on including focus groups, and we found that millennials were desperate for financial information, but here's what's important. They said they were too embarrassed to ask for help. So that means that they wanted the education, but they were more likely to Google the answer than to walk into their bank. They didn't necessarily want to admit that they didn't know. So that's where the intuitive part of marketing is. How are you teaching someone something? The most viewed videos on YouTube are all how-tos. And they could be simple, tiny little things that you think, of course someone knows how to do that. But creating a how-to, for example, on a YouTube channel is a great way for you to not only provide entertainment, point number 1, but number 2, information, and show you that you actually care to help the customer. You don't just want to sell them. And the third component is inspirational or aspirational. How are you calling them to something bigger than themselves? What's that motivation piece that you're hitting that's going to get a millennial excited? Here's some quick marketing myths that we see companies make all the time. I mean, whether it's B2B, B2C, startups, well-established companies, it's this idea, people say, oh yeah, we've got the millennial thing down, and they say one of these things. Some of the biggest myths is that your marketing has to be short. They say, oh, millennials have short attention spans. They can't pay attention to anything longer than 30 seconds. That may be true when you're getting your first engagement with them, but long form marketing is actually proving to be more effective for conversions. So if you're looking at getting excitement, sure, a quick 15, 20 second blip is going to get their attention. But if you want to convert them, you need to have more long form. And that's why longer videos, 10 to 15 minutes, if you can get people in for 10 to 15 minutes on YouTube, for example, your algorithm is going to go up and you're actually going to get more views because of the organic traffic that's going to come to you. So it does not have to be short. The second is that it has to be an app. I already said this, 99% of the App Store is not even downloaded. So how are you going to be reaching a generation? Technology is key, but don't just say you need to create an app to create an app. The most downloaded and frankly the most used apps are the ones that people use every single day. There's a convenience factor, usually for entertainment or functionality, right? Think about your own phone. What are the apps that you use the most? Is it, your app for directions? Is it your app for music or your app for an audiobook? So think about your own user experience and what it is that you're looking to get from your own app as well. The third is to not necessarily make it cheap. That's a big myth, is that this generation is cheap and they don't want to spend any money on anything. Now, brands can capture millennials at the lowest part of the market, but they can also capture millennials at the higher part. Millennials will spend lots of money on experiences. Like I said before, we're not going to spend necessarily money on kind of the traditional things, but what we spend money on, again, needs to be reflective. So don't assume that you need to create a lower price point unless your customers are telling you to. Millennials don't mind spending the money that they have on something they really want. The next myth is that it has to be techie. Now, a lot of companies that we talk to are like, well, we're not really a technology company. And that's perfectly fine. You don't need to create a technology dependent version of whatever it is that you're doing. If it naturally fits, then absolutely. If you're selling books and then you create an ebook, or even better, an e-course that's video based, then absolutely that makes sense. A quick word about apps too is if it can fit on another app they already have, then do it. So for example, if your video content can fit on an app like a YouTube, then use that platform. It's easier to get someone to look at your content on someone else's app than to get them to download your app itself. And the final myth is that it has to be innovative. Now, millennials will buy things that have been classic or retro. There's kind of this resurgence of millennials kind of going back to the way that things were, which is certainly a trend we see in marketing throughout time. So don't think that you need to have the next best thing if you're going to get millennials. Odds are the product that you are selling right now is something that millennials would love to buy. The reason, and I want you to listen to this, the reason that you're not capturing the market is because you haven't done an effective job of hitting the 4 C's. You haven't communicated their passion points and you haven't invited them into the marketing process. So I want each of you guys to spend just a few minutes here. This is one of my absolutely favorite things to do. And I've done it with groups this size and bigger around the world, and ask them to do this thing. So I want you guys to get into some small groups, and I want you guys to sell this plant. Now this plant, I want you guys to come up with a story for it. I want you guys to come up with how you would sell it. Would you use social media? Would you not? Messaging techniques. I want you guys to pull out some pen and paper. Get serious about this. And then I'm going to give you guys about 5 to 7 minutes or so. And then have you come back in, and each of you guys are going to pick a representative to actually present on this. And we're going to see who does the best job of selling this plant. All right, go ahead. So I think everybody got different components of it, right? You were able to say, yes, the social media side of it. This group here in the back said, you needed to, create some sort of review process that you can actually post reviews and experiences. I love taking the selfie with the plant in different parts of your house. So there's some really exciting ways that you can use this, and why I do. It's kind of a silly example, but most people don't think a potted plant is necessarily the number one thing that millennials want. But each of you just took this problems that you guys came up with really compelling marketing structures around how would you sell a plant to a millennial. So whether or not you sell plants, that's not the point. It's really to get you in a mindset of selling something that is going to excite a millennial market using the skills and the techniques that we've gone over here this afternoon. Millennials want to be your brand ambassadors, and this is what I'm going to leave you with, is because this generation wants to share experience. They want to share what they're doing, what they're thinking, what they're eating, where they're going, who they're with. And you are not capturing this market because you're not giving something to them that's sticky enough that they want to share. So that is your challenge. I'm going to have each of you, if you're here with your marketing teams, I want you guys during the lunchtime to be thinking through what is sticky about what we offer that a millennial is not only going to want to purchase from us, because that's step one. That's the first date. If you're wanting to go long term, you need to have them introduce their friends to you. That's the process. And that's where brands really go viral with millennials, is because they get this cult-like following. And it happens literally overnight when you learn how to take your message, take your story, put it in the palm of your hand, and then share it with the next generation. Because once you share it with them and empower them to take ownership, those are 2 words, empowerment and ownership, then you're going to sit back and watch this thing fly. That's the key when it comes to millennial marketing, is to empower your market with the skills, with the information, and with the accessibility to actually use the product that you're selling. So here's a quick checklist. You guys know I love checklists. I want you guys to take each of this. It's in the handout that's in front of you, and assess how well your marketing team is doing right now. Make a check next to everything here. I know we didn't have time to go over social media. In the next session, we're actually going to be going over how do you develop a social media campaign around this. What social media platforms do you use for what market? Remember, we went over the 4 millennial markets, and what you need to include on each of those platforms, and key words and phrases. We're actually going to do that in the workshop. So if you guys can show up to that after lunch, certainly do that. But here's a quick checklist. Number 1, you have millennial partnerships. That means that you have groups that you're working with. A great thing to do is have partnerships with, if there's a millennial group at a local company, or if there are millennial professional groups that you can partner up with. But you want to find some affinity groups that can be natural partners in getting the word out about your product. You have a multimedia presence. That means that you're not just on Facebook. My friends, just having a Facebook page is not going to cut it. I don't think I've said that enough. You need to have multimedia, and you need to have different forms. You can't take the same photo and put it across all the platforms. You can't take the same video. You need to actually alter it so that it's optimized on that platform. I'll talk more about that in the next session. You need to inform and entertain. First, you have to entertain them, folks. No one's going to want to listen to what you're selling unless they're having a good time. So start with that. Make sure that your marketing material is fresh. If you're using the same old stuff, if your logo hasn't been updated in the last 5, maybe 10 years, or maybe ever, you need to have an outward-facing profile that shows that you're modern and that you're a good representation of millennial values. You hit at least 2 of the 4 C's. I've already gone over what the 4 C's are, but you need to hit at least 2 of them. If you can try and hit 4, then hit 4, but hit at least 2. You offer some sort of insider access, so whether that's a membership or whether that's a loyalty program, but you need to include something that's going to make them feel like they're special, that they have first access, and that they can then invite their friends. You have brand ambassadors. You have people who are willing to share, whether it's officially, on their social media, or even just something that they naturally do. Now, sponsorships are very popular in social media, whether it's Instagram, YouTube, or others, where companies will literally send, whether it's apparel or supplements or some sort of product to a millennial influencer, and then they'll talk about that, do a review or something on their channel, and whether that's for free product or some sort of monetary compensation. Brand ambassadorships is one of the most effective marketing strategies when it comes to reaching millennials. Your marketing is mobile. Make sure that it is mobile friendly. It's quick and easy. It's one click and done. As little steps as possible from getting to your website to actually making the purchase. You want to make it quick and easy. And of course, your marketing is shareable. Is there something that's kind of fun or provocative or inspiring that they can screenshot or share on social media that they're going to want to share with their friends? So make that message sticky. Some of the most effective marketing campaigns right now are done because they're so outside of the box. I'm gonna leave this with you as we close out here. Domino's is a perfect example. So Domino's came in to a market that was very flooded. They were once top of their game, but their PR hadn't been great. People didn't like their pizza as much. And if you guys remember this, they had a campaign and they said, "We know you hate our pizza." This is just one of my favorite examples. They came out there and they were extremely transparent and said, but we've been listening, and so we're working on it. And they kind of showed the story of how they were working on it. It was compelling. It was disruptive. It was memorable. Because they inserted a different narrative. People always pretend like they have it all together, but they're like, we're going to be the anti. Then they've done it again with their app where you can actually track where the pizza's coming. They're doing it again with their stores and making the stores more community oriented. They're literally showing the public kind of this renovation, saying, yes, we are that next generation pizza company. And the number one demographic who's running after Domino's is who? It's the millennials. It's the generation that is fine with you saying you don't have it all together if you're willing to say, can you help me? That's the power of marketing, my friends, is because you can capture a generation who is thrilled about using your product and sharing it with the world when you understand how we think.